Hey guys, today I wanted to talk about Path of Exile 2, and one of the major issues here that's really holding me back from fully embracing and enjoying the end game as much as I really want to. The issue here is to do with the loot acquisition and progression for solo, self-found, or just in general no trade, the non-trade environment. Now, trade has all of its own problems. The economy is kind of balked, and the crazy inflation of divines and all this sort of stuff. So the trade league has all of its own issues, right? But when you're playing solo self-found in this game, there are times where it feels genuinely impossible to make any truly meaningful progress on your character. There's a few reasons for this, but the number one biggest issue for me is the loot and the RNG nature of the loot and just how difficult it is to get an item that is actually a meaningful upgrade for your character. Now, when you're not playing trade, you don't really have a choice. You have to engage in the crafting system. You have to engage in as many of the end game systems as you can to try and get a variety of loot pieces to drop for you. So you can use the other end game systems here, the breaches and expeditions and all that stuff. You can, engage with those, and you can at times get some decent loot items out of there. I do think the exotic coinage, re-rolling the vendor in your base can be useful. Sometimes they can drop you some useful items that are actually an upgrade, but for the vast majority of my experience playing solo self-found in Path of Exile 2, the loot acquisition is so bad that it actually turned me off and it made me embrace trade instead. I full on took my character over and stopped doing solo self-found and started doing trade instead. Um, which is kind of crazy to think about. For me and my personal tastes in a game like this, I would prefer just grind and naturally find loot items or craft the loot items myself. I don't really like trading that much, and the reason I don't like trading that much is it really encourages you to just sort of currency farm, and then that sort of becomes your main end game goal is to just, how many divines can I get? How quickly can I get divines and exalts? You know what I mean? Or, chaos orbs and exalts, or whatever becomes the new currency moving forward in Path of Exile. If it's not, if it's not exalts, it'll probably be chaos orbs. um, I just don't find currency grinding to be super compelling endgame. I would prefer grind for loot, which is why I prefer the solo self-found experience. But so what are the main issues with the loot system? Number one is the RNG on the affixes. There are so many bad affixes, and there aren't really any great ways to thin the pool. Now, there are a few items you can use. Of course, there are some items. There are the essences, which allow you to turn a white item into a blue item, for example, and it'll pull from a specific pool of affixes instead of all of them. So yes, there are some items in here that can help you out. However, there is just so much RNG stacked on top. Even if you get, let's say you get your white item and you roll it to blue, and then you roll it to yellow, and you get two really good affixes that you really like. Okay, you have an item that has a lot of potential. There's not really any way to then guarantee that you're going to get four other useful affixes on there. There are a few different things that you can do deep into late into the end game, but you need tons of currency, or you need to be able to farm the really high level stuff to be able to get some of that currency, some of the like the omen type stuff, and the stuff that actually lets you be a little bit more specific in terms of the affixes on your actual loot items. Yeah, there are of course like orb of annulment and stuff like that, so you can remove, so you can keep trying to reroll, but it's all random. All of that is still pretty heavily randomized, and a lot of the tools that the game does have, they are hidden very deep within the end game. Most reasonable, first time players here are just not gonna have access to most of these systems. They're not even gonna know about most of these systems because the game just doesn't really tell you about any of them. You can see here is one place that you can actually get the omens is from these ritual activities. And then of course there are, the breaches, the delirium maps and all that sort of stuff too. So there are in-game systems here. There are different ways you can increase your chances of getting items. There is obviously quantity of items and quality, rarity, I should say, of items on your, on gear and on the waystones and all that sort of stuff. So there are some ways that you can tip, turn the turn the odds in your favor, tip the odds into your favor, so to speak. But generally speaking, man, there are so many instances in the early-ish parts of mapping that I just felt like I genuinely couldn't make any real meaningful progress with my items. And I was going through so much currency using all my exalts, all my other currency just to try and roll some wands, for example, just to get like a better wand. I was stuck with like a +2 on my wand for so long. And it's just really, really frustrating when my build is being held back in such a significant way just because the RNG in the loot items is so bad. And that's pretty frustrating. And so that's the main reason that I actually turned over to the Trade League. And as I said earlier, the Trade League has all sorts of other issues, but at least on the Trade League, you can target farm certain perks. And if you're early in the end game, let's say you're level 70 or something, you can very easily pick up some very cheap items on the Trade League that will be buffs for your character, like and not just buffs, like meaningful upgrades for your character. Whereas you can run around for like 100 hours in the early mapping phases, and if you get unlucky, you could just be. It feels like a treadmill that takes you nowhere, basically, um, which is pretty frustrating experience, I think. For me personally, I would prefer just naturally find my loot on the ground or craft it, but right now just feels like there aren't any meaningful ways for you to do that in the earlier parts of the end game here. The other thing I guess we could talk about is like tutorialization of what what endgame systems are on offer, and questing and all that sort of stuff is pretty bad in the endgame too right now. And one of the things Jonathan Rogers was talking about, that's the game director for PoE2. One of the things he was talking about pre-launch was this idea that with live service games that you should have this like 4 to 6 weeks of like really good fun, and then your players should feel like they can put the game down and be satisfied, and then come back for the next sort of league. I don't feel like I'm hitting that satisfaction point when I'm playing solo self-found. I feel like I hit a brick wall, and that's why I want to put the game down, not because I feel satisfied that my build got to a certain point where I was happy. I don't mind the game being challenging or being, I guess, a little more on the hardcore, spectrum or whatever, however you want to say it. But I don't think loot acquisition has to be this slow and this stingy. I don't think it feels good. I think it feels kind of bad after a little while when things feel so stingy like this. And then, as I said before, you can just casually go over to to the Trade League and get some meaningful character upgrades. Problem with Trade League though, there's so much crazy inflation in there that some of the best items in the game are now completely out out of most players' grasp. Like there's no way most normal players are gonna be able to grind 300, 400 divine orbs for some of these best in slot items. Like that's not really realistic for most players either. There are obviously some super grinders in there who grind a lot, and there are probably some savvy people who early on in the league were just accumulating divines through currency exchange before the value of them went crazy. And that was really smart. You know what? If you do that, hats off to you. You are smart. I did not think of that in the slightest. But yeah, so in terms of future leagues and stuff like that, man, they're gonna have to do something about the RNG on the loot affixes. We need some better way for solo players to target some things that will actually be character upgrades. Otherwise, I just think new players or less less familiar players with the systems, they're going to get super frustrated. They feel like they can't progress and probably just quit after, I don't know, how many maps would you do in a row without a feeling of progression before you would quit? Great question. Let me know in the comment down below if you have an answer for that. And the other thing is to just round everything off and top everything off here. When you die, you then lose experience. Not only do you lose your map sustain, you lose all the juice you put in the maps, you then lose a big chunk of experience, which means if you can't grind for better items, you also probably won't be able to level up and you're just completely stuck. And man, I don't think that's great. I don't think that is a great design philosophy to have for your end game. I don't need the game to be super, super easy. I don't mind death, having some repercussion or some, some meaning in the game. Sure. Look at my character gets completely frozen, completely stuck still and almost died there. It was pretty brutal, but hey. Well, there you go, guys. A bit of a discussion video for today. I think the solo loot experience really needs some work for the next league. I hope they're able to figure something out to make loot items for non-trade players be more interesting and more engaging. But with that being said, guys, I hope you all have a fantastic, amazing day. Let me know what you think down below with a comment. And I hope you all have a great day. Catch you in the next video. Take it easy.